Your voice is not too weak for God to speak loudly and boldly through you.
Sadie, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you are super busy this week. This is launch week as we're recording. The book came out yesterday and you got a ton going on. So thank you for taking the time.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Hey, it's exciting to talk about. It's crazy when you write a book, you write it and then months later it comes out and then it's just out. So It's nice to take some time to really talk about it and celebrate the moment.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it bears talking about that I'm about to release my second book. This whole season of the podcast is called the Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots season, leading up to that book coming out. And so I now know 2 times over how hard it is to write a book, period. And you did this book, pregnant, giving birth, 2 weeks. I just saw a reel, 2-week-old honey on your chest. You're holding her and writing the book. And then, yesterday she's clapping and holding this book. That's intense. That's an intense version. So clearly this message was important to you, that you felt like it really needed to get out there.
Yeah, it was intense. I'm not going to lie. I don't know that I recommend to anyone starting to write a book when you're 7 months pregnant. But I did feel like it was a timely message. I honestly didn't know it was that timely. Whenever I had the idea to write this book, I took it to the publishing company and said, here's my idea. Here's the book I want to write. And they said, this is so timely. We want this now. And it was such a God thing. I mean, even when I came to them with the idea, I had every chapter title that I wanted. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. It was just very clear, And I just felt like God was really behind this message, that it was almost a prompting to write it. And so that's what made me say, okay, let's do this. Yeah, it's going to be a little crazy. It's going to be a little wild, but it's going to be worth it. And sitting here, almost 9 months later, I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that I did it, that even though it was hard, it was worth it, because now the book's out. And I do think it is a timely message for people to read.
Yeah. Sadie, I have to imagine that as you're writing it, obviously it's very front of mind. You're thinking of the world that your daughter's going to come into, that she's going to be a teenager in a few years from now, but eventually. And I want to ask 2 parts of that question. What was the trajectory that you observed and said, we are on a really scary path here, and this is where I'm afraid we're going to end up? And then what are you hoping we can kind of course correct to get back to? Because I don't think social media is, I don't know. There are days I super wish it would, but I don't think social media is going anywhere.
It's definitely not going anywhere. I don't perceive, unless the internet shuts down. Yeah. I don't think it's going anywhere. But yeah, Honey is definitely my biggest inspiration for writing this book, because I am so grateful that I do have a platform in today's day and age that I can say things that potentially could affect change. We all can. And I think we all have to realize that social media is not going to change until we change, because social media is what we make it. It's only as healthy as we are. It's a reflection of our health, because social media is platforms we create. It's, we post our pictures, we choose who we follow, we, set the trends. And so the more we keep setting these trends and the more we keep posting these posts and following these types of people, the more we will have the same problems, And I have to say, I'm a big advocate for social media. The positive sides of social media are amazing and honestly a gift to the world. But the negative sides of social media will take the world out if we don't, get a hold of them. And for Honey growing up, honestly, what motivated me to write it for her are just the things that I went through, as a just girl who grew up with social media and grew up with a sense of fame, and knowing that my story reflects the story of millions of other young people who they might say, well, I wasn't on Dancing with the Stars and I wasn't, on Dynasty, but yet they understand the same things and the same effects that growing up in a culture that is obsessed with image and that is obsessed with the selfie, and that is, in a comparison culture or a cancel culture, they know the same effects of those things. And so I wanted to hopefully give some wisdom and some discernment when it comes to how we handle social media in a biblical and practical way.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's important to read this part. It's very early in the book. You say, you're talking about tapping on the Instagram app and hitting the little X. You say, it really needed to go. I was distracted by everyone else's lives and unhappy with my own. I finally became uncomfortable with wasting my time. It was like the numbing medicine had worn off, like Novocaine, and I was tired of having a crooked smile. I was tired of the comparisons, tired of caring what other people thought, tired of caring too much about what others were doing, tired of feeling anxious, and tired of feeling like I wasn't enough while trying to make it look like I was. And I think that that's so important that you share that. And I think it's important for us to lead off the episode with here, because it's so tempting that for somebody to look at you, for somebody to look at whoever they're looking up to, that they're following, and feel like, I would never have guessed that. I would never have guessed that somebody who's made it all the way there would still compare, would still feel distracted, would still be consumed by what other people are doing. But it is just like this human condition. I feel like that is like the very struggle of social media that you've captured in that paragraph. And, you even talk about when you made your account public and when you were on Dancing with the Stars. It was at the very moment that you were reaching 1 million followers that you felt some of your loneliest, that some real life friendships were falling away. And just like, speak for a little while to this idea that you can be the loneliest person being watched by 1 million people, that it's not the same. Connection is not the same as popularity.
Totally. Yeah. I talk about how being seen is the cheapest version of being known. And I think so many people think that if they have 1 million followers, then they will have made it. They will know that they're loved. They never second guess themselves. They would always be confident. They would not struggle with comparison. Then it would answer all their problems. Yeah. And from someone who has experienced 1 million followers, that's not the case. That does not make you feel loved and known and worthy and confident and all of those things. If anything, it actually might add more pressure to your plate of having the opinions of the world on your back, and every move you make being something worth everyone talking about and debating about. And it can really make you question who you are. And yeah, so at a time when I had millions of followers, I didn't feel like I had very many genuine friends, and I felt super lonely. Yeah. And, that's not necessarily social media's fault, but it is my fault for putting emphasis on something in social media can be the answer to all my problems, And I have found that nothing can satisfy my soul like Jesus can. No followers, no amount of likes, no amount of people praising my name, no amount of anything can make me feel the love that I desire to feel, the feeling of feeling known that I desire to have, the feeling of worth that I desire to have, then living in Jesus Christ and knowing I'm his daughter and letting that be my sole identity. And so I wanted to talk about this because I feel like so many people genuinely are on this striving train, hoping to hit fame, thinking that would be the answer to all these tough problems that they're facing. And it just is not. And when I wrote that part at the beginning of the book, I think that reflects so many people's stories of they keep deleting social media because they keep getting mad at the fact that it's like not good for them. And then they get it right back, just like an unhealthy relationship. It's like, oh, all of our problems will be gone if we just break up for a little while. And then you get back in the relationship and you're like, oh, shoot, you're the same person. And I'm the same person. And we didn't actually change anything. Yeah. And it's like we know there's something to this about that social media has a negative effect, but we're not stopping long enough to fix it. We're not stopping long enough to fix our hearts. And I think if we could stop long enough to get our priorities in place, to feel fully known and loved and all those feelings in Jesus Christ from following Jesus, then social media will become a place of overflow. It will become a place of abundance, become a place of positive enlightenment, not just highlight reel, but positivity and love, and yes, real authentic moments of hard moments, but encouragement when people are going through those hard things. And so I think, we can't come to social media seeking things that we can only find in Jesus. We have to come to social media already have founding those things and let it be an overflow of what we already know we have. Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. I have like 5 different questions off of that. The first one is, from doing this show, there's I've gotten to sit down from a lot of people who have in different ways built very, very large platforms and followings, whether they're musicians or authors or whatever the case is. And something that I've gotten the sense of, I feel like I'm an empath. I kind of like absorb emotion. Something I've gotten the sense from sitting with those people is that there's a certain weariness to only being seen as the thing that they do. And that's a huge part of what this whole season is that's leading up to my book coming out. It's this idea of how do we find grace, freedom, and purpose in an overachieving world. And we just grow, we like chase these things and chase these things and chase these things. And I've kind of noticed like when you get to that certain point, and I have stories like this in my life too, like you almost can become like a caricature to people where it's like you are, like you were saying, Dancing with the Stars or Duck Dynasty or The Following, or this person is their, that they make albums or make music or whatever. And we stop just being human to one another. And Shauna Nequist was just on right before you hopped on, and we were talking about this, and she said, I feel like sometimes people expect me to be a person in the public eye without expecting me to be a person. And just that, like, I guess the question I asked her this, I've asked other people this, is there ever a moment you kind of wish you could go back to keeping the account private? Like, do you ever wish you could put the like genie back in the bottle in terms of having all these eyes on things? Or is there something you have found that makes all of that stuff you described, the people having an opinion about you and all that, despite that, it's still worth it? You still wouldn't change it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have to say, there have certainly been times in my life where I wish it would have all gone away. When I'm like, I wish no one knew who I was. I wish I could introduce myself without someone already knowing my name. Yeah. I wish people wanted to ask you questions because they didn't assume they already knew everything about me. There are certainly moments of that. There are even moments of fear because I've had some crazy stalker situations when it comes to social media that have made me want to just delete the app because it freaks me out that people know what me and my family look like and are obsessed with where we live and all those things. And so there are certainly moments that the overwhelming aspect of fame makes you want to hide and makes you want to quit. But there is another side of me that is so convicted by the words of Jesus when he said, you are the light of the world. You're a city on a hill. You are like a light that is lit in the house, and a lamp was not meant to be put under a stand for it to be hidden. It's meant to be on top of the stand so that it gives light to everyone in the house. And it says in the same way, let your deeds glorify your Father in heaven. Let your light shine to glorify your Father in heaven. And I just think about that so much when it comes to fame and when it comes to social media. I have an opportunity to be a light in the world, a light in a dark world. I have the opportunity to bring people to maybe their eternal hope. I have the opportunity to maybe introduce people to their one true love, Jesus. I have the opportunity to do that. And so it's all worth it. And when I see the ministry that I've been able to have in college students' lives and people's life all over the world, and key conversations I get to have, it definitely makes everything be worth it. When I get to come into my office in the morning and be here with my teammates and we get to be on mission together doing something for the kingdom, it's incredible. And people will misunderstand you and people will overlook you, or people will know you by what you did and not for who you are. And that's really unfortunate. But I can't let that stop me from what I feel called to do and what I feel like is making an impact on the world. But I remember right before I had Honey, getting really freaked out by social media. And this is just last year, and I'd already gained a huge following. I've had it for years. I've been famous, if you will, for like 10 years of my life. And so you would think I'd be used to it, but I got totally freaked out. And I was like, oh, I don't want her to be known. I don't want anybody to know what she looks like. I don't even want to be known now because I just want to protect her and her to live in this bubble and be safe and all the things. Yeah. And I remember I texted actually a good friend of mine who's an actress, and she's a very well-known actress, Christian woman. And I said, how did you do it? How did you decide to show your kids to the world? Because I know so many celebrities decide to hide their kids and all that stuff. And she said, Sadie, to be honest, we just believe that we are called to be a light in the world. And we believe that social media has given us a platform to set an example of what a biblical family looks like, and what it looks like to love the Lord and love each other, and what it looks like to be real and authentic. And she said, so that's why we do it. And we just trust that God is our protector and God is our defender. And man, I took that advice and ran with it. And I don't want to do anything out of the, aspect of fear. Like, I don't want to make my decisions in life because of fear. I don't want to be like, oh, I'm not going to post about our family because I'm afraid. Yeah. I want to be able to say like, God's my defender. God's my protector. Even if people misunderstand us, even if people say weird things, even if people do whatever, like God's our defender and we're doing this for him. We're not just trying to build our platform. We're trying to build his kingdom. Yeah. And so with that, like there's so much purpose in it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. Let's dig into a little bit. You lay this out in the book. Some of the crazy statistics around where we're headed with social media. And one of them is for teenagers, 7 hours a day, which is,
yeah,
I think if I'm doing the math right, we're getting close to a third of their lives. Right?
Yeah.
Right? Is that? Yeah.
Hey, I'm not good at math, but that's a lot. It sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. I mean, that is a big part of people's life. I know I put a statistic in there that on average, like at the end of our life, we will have spent 6 years and 8 months on social media. I mean, that is alarming. That's crazy. Yeah. And, I'm not necessarily here to say this is so terrible that we're spending so much time on social media. But it is terrible if social media is a negative influence on our life, if we're not doing anything with intention behind it, if we're not doing anything with purpose behind it. I mean, if we look at the end of our day and I say, man, I spent 6 years social media on my life, but I brought all these people to the kingdom of God and I was able to build platforms that help people and I was able to inspire girls. Well, that's a good thing, or maybe I was able to watch sermons that changed my life, or I was able to follow people who inspired me, or I followed this person who led me to that person who led me to my husband, or, there are aspects of spending time on social media. It's a beautiful thing, but wouldn't it be so sad to say I spent 6 years of my life on social media and I'm lonely and I'm insecure and I'm unhappy and I don't like my life and everyone else is thriving and I wish I was like that. Yeah. I mean, come on, like that's not a way to live. And that's what I talked about in the book. I'm watching everyone else live their life and I'm wasting my own. Like I want to live too. And, it's not other people's fault for sharing their highlight reel. Why don't I go live and create one for myself, and maybe I'm going through a hard time in life and that's okay to share too, that's okay too, because we're all going to go through seasons. There's a time for everything, but the statistics are very alarming and, that's the reality of where we're at. And I'm just trying to say, don't delete it, but let's have balance with it,
Yeah. I mean, I do think, and if you address this in the book, and it's important for people listening for us to just make sure we are saying this and address it, is like, there is like the element of social media being neutral, and it's like money, and it's like, how are you going to use it for good or for bad? But there are things, and you talk about that documentary, The Social Dilemma, specifically with social media, that I don't know that it is fully neutral, right? There's definitely there's definitely like for powers that be or forces that be that benefit from us just scrolling and benefit from us just being kind of, I don't know where 30 minutes went or 2 hours or whatever the case may be. So it's like, I don't even know what a good analogy would be, but it's like us trying to show, I guess it's just the analogy of the world. It's like the world is fallen and there is evil in the world and we still have to show up and try to do good, even though the environment might have been touched by darkness, right? It's not, the world is not neutral. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I think that there are some aspects of social media that are, built to trap you, built into the program to make you, susceptible to certain things. And that's why it's so important I talk about. You have to guard your heart. The internet is a place where people are off guard and the enemy is running wild with that. There should never be a time, including when you're scrolling on social media, that you are not on guard to the schemes of the enemy, that your heart is not protected. And I think when you get on social media and you're using it as a, time to just waste or a time to just scroll or a time to just numb, you have to also be careful that your heart is still guarded. Yeah. And so I think, the cool thing about social media, though, is most platforms are still, even though, yes, the Social Dilemma definitely shows us that people behind the scenes in the platform is definitely tricky and it is definitely getting us. You can still beat it in a sense. Like, you know, for instance, I had like so many ads on Instagram, and you can actually turn off your ads in your feed, you know, so that you don't get ads. You cannot click on ads on Instagram, because the more you click, the more it shows you. You cannot, if you search for something. So like, for instance, I write about this in the book. I don't even watch The Bachelor, but one season I typed in The Bachelor on my search bar because I was interested in who The Bachelor was. And I saw the person, whatever, didn't even think about it. The next day, and literally a month later, all I had on my Explore page was The Bachelor. It was like memes after meme. And I'm like, you would literally think I am Bachelor Nation in the flesh. Like, you would think I'm the biggest Bachelor fan ever if you saw my social media, because of one search that I did. And so that's just an example of like, guard your heart. Like, obviously that was not detrimental to my faith that I, you know, looked up The Bachelor. But maybe, you know, you're on there and you look up one thing, and maybe it's not necessarily the best thing to look up, and you're about to get blasted with it. And so just be cautious about what you do. Like, know the platform so that you know the schemes of it, and so that you can own it and it doesn't own you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. There's a part where you're talking about the 7 touches rule in marketing, and, you know, it takes 7 touches usually with a brand before you move from like awareness to customer. And you say, apply this to social media. The more times you are presented with a thought or an idea, the more readily you will accept it. Scary, right? Our ideas, thoughts, habits, morals, values, likes and dislikes are being shaped simply by repetition. And that all goes back to who we are following, whatever you choose to look at constantly, you invite into your world. And I thought that was such a powerful point and a powerful analogy to draw. It's like a lot of times I'm like, you know, I feel like I can talk to people that I disagree with. I feel like I can like watch stuff, and I don't feel like my beliefs are that shakeable. And it's not the like, you know, one thing that's being shoved in your face. It's like river through the rock. It's just like over and over subtly when you're not even expecting it. And
Totally.
I think that's just something for all of us to hear. It's like, what are we being influenced by that we don't even realize, just because of like we see it all the time?
Yeah, it's something to be aware of. I wrote about how the trend of biker shorts, when biker shorts first came into being, I was like, that is not cute. And I thought, those are not shorts, those are spandex. I was so opinionated. And then guess what? I got myself 3 pairs of biker shorts now years later, because after time of seeing it, I became used to it and numb to it. And I'm fully aware of the fact that I was influenced. You know, I had an opinion that was not very cute. And I thought that was spandex and that was not to be a short. And then 3 years later, here I am on, you know, Instagram posting a picture of my biker shorts and my oversized t-shirt, you know? And so that's just an example that you can be influenced. And again, that's not necessarily detrimental to my faith, the fact that I didn't like biker shorts and now I do. But when it gets to bigger issues, it can be detrimental. It can be detrimental to who you are, who you believe you are, what you feel like you need to do in life, the people that you need to be in contact with in life, the path that you're going to go on in life. You know, at one point you could say, oh, I'd never do that. And the next thing you know, you're doing it. And it's totally normal because you're used to it. And I even remember whenever I lived in California for a small bit of time, it wasn't that I necessarily dressed immodest, but some of the outfits I wore, you know, would never probably wear in Louisiana, where I'm from. But the only reason I wore them there is because everybody did, you know, and it's just easy to, you know, become to kind of adapt to your surroundings. And social media is a place where you really got to be cautious and know that you are being influenced, you know, and it's either going to be for the good or it's going to be for the bad. And it's normally not neutral. It normally is good or bad, you know, but then there are some neutral, like biker shorts, whatever, Bachelor, whatever. But there are some really big things that go one way or the other.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about this idea of vulnerability and leadership. And you were saying that sometimes you'll get comments like, it must be nice not to have any problems, like X, Y, and Z, and they'll list them out. And you'll say, but I do have them is the thing. I just don't talk about them on social media. And I tend to be very much the same way, where it's like, I process the hard things with my trusted group of people.
Totally.
And there was actually like an episode recently where we were talking about, you know, Brene Brown talks about this in terms of the fire hose of vulnerability, and that we will kind of sometimes be tempted, some people will be tempted to blast people with their hard things because it almost forces connection. Now you know these hard things about me, so we must be connected. And so I tend to really worry about that when I look at social media and I see people processing very hard, very personal things. And I was saying in that episode, I feel like that's one of the reasons they end up lonelier than they were, is because they post the thing and they get all of this feedback and all of this like positive, reinforcement for sharing the hard thing. But where are those people on day 2? And now it feels lonelier than it was even before sharing it. And so the question that I have for you is, what do you feel like the balance is for leaders? And I've seen you talk about this. We're not talking about people with a certain number of followers or certain, whether they're influencers or not, but people who are leaders, to walk that balance of being transparent enough so people understand that life is not perfect and they do have things they struggle with. But guarding their heart, especially in, all of that I just said, in a very filtered world where everything starts to feel always perfect. But with like guarding your heart and getting to be a human and not feeling like you owe strangers all of your hardest moments.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. You don't owe anyone anything, And I think so many of us think that we do because our following feels entitled to that. They think you need to share, because if you don't share, then you're trying to create a perfect life, or you're trying to show your highlight reel. And to be honest, the intent behind my heart of not sharing the hard things is never to look a certain way. It's never been to create a highlight reel or to perceive to be perfect. It's literally because I'm going through something that I feel would be a disservice to even myself to share with the world before I get with the Lord or before I get with my family. And there are some things that you have to create boundaries for that, you wouldn't, I mean, to be honest, if you were sitting in a room with the number of followers that you had, you probably would never say, because you would realize in that room, they don't know you like that, like they don't need to know that part of your life. That's something that you would turn to your best friend and say, or your husband and say, or your family and say. And, I think we have to normalize social media a little bit more to know, like, don't do what you wouldn't normally do. Don't act how you wouldn't normally act.
Right.
Don't live one way that you wouldn't in your real life. And you're so right. When we share and we overshare these things, we end up feeling lonelier. And I love how you mentioned Brene Brown, because I read her book and I loved how she talked about vulnerability. But one thing she said about vulnerability was, you see, vulnerability is powerful when it's met with empathy, when it's met with like this love and this joy and this true compassion and all these different things. And that's something that you can really only find with your people, because your people know you and your people walk with you. So when you're vulnerable with your family and your family chooses to love you and your family chooses to walk with you, then they show you that empathy. That's what makes you feel alive and feel like you can come past it. But Brene, she also says in her book, she says, but when vulnerability is like met with a lack of empathy, that's actually when it gets really tough. And that's where shame steps in the door. And so, you're getting feelings of empathy online, you're getting love and support, likes, whatever, but you're not really getting that true empathy where someone's sitting with you and loving you through a hard moment and, showing up the next day and checking on you and making sure you're okay. And because you might feel that lack of empathy because you're like, when people aren't really here, the next post they're on to something else, I think that is when you end up feeling shame and you end up feeling lonely, and that wound is never healed because you looked up to it from an online community, not your in-person community. And I certainly think, I love what Kristen Kane says. She says, yes, there is something to being authentic and there is something to being vulnerable, but there's also something to having integrity and not just spilling your guts out to social media and knowing when to share it and who to share it to. I think the best example I have is whenever I, had just had Honey, and a lot of moms were bashing me for not sharing my postpartum pictures and saying that I was like making them feel really insecure and like setting a bad example for moms and women. And for me, to be honest, like, I'm not against people sharing their postpartum pictures, but I personally just have a boundary there. I naturally would not stand in front of everyone in my underwear in any scenario in my life. Even if I looked amazing, I wouldn't do that. I just don't do that kind of thing. And because I know if I do that, then that's not just going to go out to 4 million people, but that's going to go on every single news article. And that's going to be the first thing on my Google post and all the thing. And then you type in Sadie Robertson, it'll be me in a bra and underwear in my postpartum body. And then one day my kids are going to see that. And I just don't need that, And so what people were perceiving as me trying to be perfect was actually me just setting a boundary and saying, actually, that's just something that only me and my husband need to see, not the whole world. And so not to say that there's not something to posting about postpartum. I did post about that, but I didn't feel the need to literally post a picture of my stomach, and maybe one day I will, maybe the next baby, who knows what will come over me. But I just say that to say your perspective on things isn't everything. You don't know the behind the scenes story. And there is something beautiful to just being able to not choose to misunderstand someone, but to just choose to believe the best for the other person. Yeah.
That's so good. As you were talking, I don't even know what you just said in passing. I think it's just like the way that you just sort of when I was reading the book, something I was very impressed by was your ability to talk about like things that didn't work the way that you wanted them to the first time, or things that didn't like feel the way that you wanted them to. And you specifically are talking about like when you first were getting into speaking and like you were supposed to speak for 20 minutes and you only spoke for 5 minutes, and like a tour that you were trying to put together that like, not enough people signed up for. And as somebody who literally spoke to 6 people in a TGI Fridays, I think it was a TGI, maybe it was one of those chains.
That's awesome.
I super was like, I really appreciate that. Like, I appreciate that kind of just like vulnerability and honesty about like, you can try things and it doesn't always work out the first time. And I think what was very impressive to me about that, and what that impressed on me, what I'm working on right now, is like when you are fully known and fully loved by God, then you can go after whatever big goal, purpose thing you feel like you're called to, because even if it flops and, 45 people in a stadium or 6 people in a TGI Fridays, whatever, it doesn't change who you are. And I was so just in one breath how you could like talk about navigating all of these amazing things you accomplished, New York Fashion Week, what have you. And in the same one be like, but this is really what was going on. I think that is such a gift. I think anytime somebody says, I felt like, you see me now like speaking on these stages or these huge conferences, you see these videos or whatever, but like, let me tell you how this started. I think anytime we can kind of open that door and hold space for like, it's been a long, bumpy road to get here. I just think that's really powerful. And that leads me into talking more about this idea of being seen and known. You share a Tim Keller quote, which I love. You say, to be loved but not known is comforting. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. But to be fully known and truly loved is, well, a lot like being loved by God. And I just want to talk about this. A quote that you added that I really loved is, when we hide who we really are and stay simply likable, we make it hard for someone to love us. And if they do, we find it nearly impossible to believe them. And I just think that's so, just talk about that a little bit, this idea of what it looks like to show up and trust somebody else. You talk through like dating your husband and just like this fear of like, can I even show the real me? So talk about this, like moving from a place of we all want to be seen to what it really truly looks like to show up known and loved. And then if other people see you, that's fine.
Totally. Yeah. So that goes back to that time in my life where, I'm seeing about all these people, I have 1 million followers and they all like me, but I couldn't help but think, but they don't know me. And because they don't know me, would they actually love me? If they did, they think I'm this, they think I'm goals. But if they knew how insecure I was, would they actually like me? Would they actually think I'm this poster child of Christianity? When they knew the things I've done, if they knew the things I went through? And it makes it impossible, I mean, even in not a social media aspect, even with like Christian, I remember telling Christian, I said, when we started dating, I said, don't tell me you love me until you really know me. And what I meant by that was I had several relationships where I just felt like people would just tell me they love me so fast. It would be like 2 weeks in, I was like, I love you. And it's like, thank you, but you don't know me like you. And then I couldn't even believe them because I'm like, man, you love the idea of me, but you don't know me yet. So there's no way you love me. Because you might like me, but that you don't love me, you know? And so Christian really got to know me, and it was months in, and it was actually after we had this very, very serious talk about our past and shared some of the hard stuff that we had walked through, that Christian for the first time told me that he loved me. And it was the most powerful thing, because when he told me he loved me, I knew he knew me. Like, I knew he knew the worst parts of me, and he still loved me. And that's what made love so wild. And I think that's the same thing with God's love. Like, you know, it was kind of a controversial song that Corey Asbury said, reckless love, but it's reckless. It's so insane. It's so wild that God, the God of the universe, knit me together in my mother's womb, knows me so well, knows all my thoughts, knows everything I've ever done. And he loves me. Like, that is wild. And that's what makes love so powerful, is that you're known, you know? And so I think, you know, so many of us think to obtain love is to remain likable, to remain agreeable, enjoyable, attractive. But actually, it's in the moments that you're raw and that you're messy and that you're imperfect and that you mess up and you have to ask for forgiveness. You have to make a turnaround. You have to fight through some of the low moments, that love becomes so powerful, because then you're like, man, like, you're not going anywhere. If that didn't run you off and you're here to stay, then like we can work with that, you know? Yeah. And so I think that's with social media. Social media, to be honest, it's just not created to be all those things for you. It's not created to be your source of love and your source of joy and your source of comfort. It's a place to share in and of those things, but it's not a place to find them. Yeah. And I think that's the scary thing, is that we're going to it to find things you really can only find in real relationships with people. And social media was created to mimic like community and to create community and to have relationship. And it does that, but it doesn't do that in fullness, you know? And so if we're missing that feeling of known and we're missing all that, then we're really missing it. Yeah.
Yeah. One big last area I definitely want us to hit on is this idea of purpose and the difference between, to start, let's talk about the difference between pleasure and purpose when it comes to your happiness. And some of the like studies that you were sharing there, there's actually like a part of your brain that gets lit up by pleasure versus like gets lit up by purpose. So just talk a little bit about, like, we think these things that bring pleasure, these things that feel like fame, like you were talking about how many people want to be famous, that we think that's where happiness is, but it actually like wears out our brain.
Yeah, no, Dr. Amen is one of the doctors that I've seen in my life, because he deals with like a lot of celebrities who get really famous. And he talks about how that pleasure center can just like die in your brain when it gets overworked. And it's kind of scary, because it's like nothing really does it for you, you know, like you can be in front of like a whole crowd of people and they're cheering your name and you just are empty inside and you're just like, this doesn't do anything for me, because you've already had that, because you already experienced that. And, you know, I think it probably could have been an easy thing in my life to get to the point of a little bit of that jadedness of like, okay, like been here, done that, seen that, but I don't do what I do for pleasure. I do what I do for purpose. And because of that, every time I get on a stage, I'm freaking out. I'm like so nervous. I'm like so excited. I'm like, God, what are you going to do? Because I'm not dependent on me. I'm dependent on God. Like, I don't need people to clap for me. I want people to come to know Jesus. And like that purpose is what lights you up. That purpose is what keeps you going. And I think so many people think that their purpose and their pleasure are the same thing, that their purpose and their platform are the same thing, but it's really not, because you could have a platform and you could have all the things that, you know, give you pleasure in a sense, but you could still feel like you don't have purpose in life, you know, because purpose doesn't all of a sudden doesn't equal like platform. You can have that and not be doing anything with it, and it doesn't really equal purpose. But you could have no platform and be killing it and doing everything you feel called to do and feel like you're living out your purpose. And so I just encourage people, like, your purpose isn't waiting on a platform. Your purpose isn't waiting for you to do something crazy. Your purpose is just to love God and love people wherever you're at. And if you do that, there will be fulfillment. I find that fulfillment not just on a stage. I find that fulfillment when I'm, literally sitting at coffee with someone who I get to have a conversation about Jesus with. Like this weekend, I have about 50 girls coming down to my hometown, and we're doing a little retreat that I just get to pour into these girls, and we get to fellowship with one another. Like, that's incredible. That's 50 people. That's not 50,000. It's not 500. It's 50. But like, there's so much purpose in it. I'm so excited for it. And so you got to have purpose. That's what keeps you going. The other things, they fade. The other things, they wear off. The other things, they're exciting for a time, and then they're not so much anymore. But purpose will always be exciting.
Yeah, I love that. I want to kind of so we've been talking so much about, just sort of balancing like a lot of eyes on things and like our relationship to social media. And there's kind of this like flip side of it. There's like all the people who maybe feel like, I want more and more and more followers. I want to be seen. I want to be famous. I want to know things. Then there are the people who are listening, and I have definitely had moments of this myself where we actually kind of dread the moment that there are a lot of eyes on something. Like for example, for me with writing books, I simultaneously want a lot of people to read these books because I think they will be very helpful. But there's also this moment of like, it's kind of nice over here. It's kind of nice in our little house with our dogs and whatever. And so sometimes I feel like, and I bet there are a lot of people listening right now who play small because the headaches that would come with more eyes on something, the attacks, the fear, the frustration. And you have a quote where you say, Jesus does not want you to be another hidden follower in the crowd, striving just to be enough in life. You do not have to reach some level of perfection or likability for Jesus to acknowledge you. He loves you with an unending love. So, and also another quote, when you stop and praise God, everything changes. You breathe confidence. So just talk to that person for a second, and maybe that person is me, where we do kind of like play small sometimes. We do kind of fear that success because of all that would come with it, all of the criticism, the attacks, the whatever that tend to come with more eyes. So talk about like stepping into purpose even in the face of criticism.
Totally. Yeah, it is scary. I never will tell anyone if someone's like, oh, I'm scared because people are going to be mean or people are going to criticize you. I'm never going to say they won't. I'm like, oh, yeah, they will. Like that will happen. You will get that. People are rude, and that is a part of it. So I'm not going to say that won't happen, but I would never also say don't do it, because God is with you. And when you get into the place in the space of your life where you are fully dependent on God, when you are like, if God does not show up, and if God does not protect me, and if God is not breathing life through me, then this is really going to flop, or this is really not going to do anything for anyone. It's the coolest place to be, because you're constantly setting yourself up to see a miracle. You're constantly setting yourself up to see what God's going to do. And it's just the most amazing thing. And so, you are scared because you are small, but you should be confident in the fact that you're small because you get to see God be big. Yeah. And so don't fear doing something because you're small. Do it because God inside of you is so big and he's so strong. And that might sound cheesy, but that's really just true. And it's really just actually very powerful to see God. You're not too weak for God to be strong in you. You're not too afraid for God to be big in you. Your voice is not too weak for God to speak loudly and boldly through you. I remember I used to have the countryest little accent. I mean, you might think I'm country now, but I mean, it was country, and it was high pitch and everything. And you would have thought, how could I use my voice to be heard by that many people? But it's not about my voice. It's about what God did through me. And so, there is a temptation to stay small and to be comfortable and live a comfortable lifestyle. But living a life for Jesus is not comfortable. It's not meant to be comfortable. It's not meant to be without adversity. But just because there's adversity doesn't mean God's not in it. It actually probably means he is, and getting to see God fight on your behalf is one of the coolest things ever.
Wow. I have to tell you, I have just been so impressed with you through this entire interview. You are so wise well beyond your years, and just so gentle and humble. And I'm just so thankful for you and thankful for the
Thank
time and
you.
the work that you're doing and everything you shared with us. So let them know where they can get their hands on this book that just came out
Yes,
yesterday.
thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
congrats on your book and
Oh,
everything
thank you.
you're doing. You're a great interviewer. And thank you genuinely for taking the time to read it and ask good questions.
Yeah.
It means so much. But yeah, if you want to read Who Are You Following, you can get it anywhere books are sold. You can also get it online at Amazon.com or my website, liveoriginal.com, or in store any place. And I'm so thankful for that. So yeah, go get the book. Hope you feel encouraged and inspired. And thanks again for having me on your platform.
Yeah. All right, friends. The book is Who Are You Following? Pursuing Jesus in a Social Media Obsessed World. It's out now everywhere books are sold. Grab a copy for you and a whole group of friends to go through it together. And while you're there, make sure you go ahead and get that pre-order in for Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots. It's sitting on your doorstep when it comes out April 5th. Here is to leaning into grace, freedom, and purpose over popularity and resting in the knowledge that you are truly loved and known instead of just wanting to be seen. Until next time, friends, this is The Mary Marantz Show.